Good morning. Welcome back to our creative videos. I'm Loretta Hayes from Hayes Sewing Machine Company in Wilmington, Delaware. And today we are going to kind of switch up our creative video a little bit. We've had a lot of questions and comments on our background quilt and how this quilt is quilted. And so we thought we would show actually how we did this. You could do this simple quilting. It's very organic, very simple to do. You could do this on a regular machine with a walking foot and just basically kind of gradually just go back and forth and just work your way across the quilt. But in reality, what I did with this quilt is I did this on a long arm. And so what we thought we would do is show you how simple it is to put a quilt on a long arm. And if you have got a new long arm and you're a little hesitant, this would be like the perfect pattern to get started with. If you've got a long arm that's been sitting there for a little while and you need to get your feet wet again, once again, super simple way of doing this. So we're going to move over to the long arm and we're going to show you some fun things. So we're over here at the frame for the Handy Quilter Moxie. It is a roller frame, and so what you'll see is you have rods on the back. So there is one rod that's got a leader cloth, and then another rod that the leader cloth will go underneath. And then we have two rods at the front that have leader cloths on them. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our backing of our quilt and we're going to fold our backing in half and find the center of the backing. You will see on my leader cloth that I have a mark that's marked for the center. And all I'm going to do is take my regular straight pins I'm going to put the pretty side of my backing facing down, which if you think about it, it's exactly what you would do if you were layering up a quilt for your domestic machine. You'd have the pretty side of the backing facing the table. And we're going to pin about every 6 inches. You'll notice that I'm just putting the two pieces of fabric together and I'm just pinning it like a seam. The most important thing when you're pinning your backing on to the frame is that your backing should be straight. And so for this particular quilt, I pieced two 45-inch wide fabrics together. And so I have the salvage edges, which are going to be straight. But if you were working with this raw edge, you would want to take the time to go ahead and straighten that up. Any amount of time that you take to straighten your fabric is going to pay off in the long run when you're quilting your quilt. So we'll come down here and we'll now work the other way. So I went from the center to one edge, and actually, Pam, let me just show one thing. When you come to the very edge here, I've been pinning, and it really doesn't matter where which way your pins are. But when you get to that end, you want to take and put the pin with the head facing the raw edge of the fabric. What that does is it makes it a little bit more secure when you tighten up on the frame. On this side, that's going to naturally kind of happen. We're going to go along. So you see the heads of my pins have kind of changed depending on the direction that I've got. Doesn't make any difference. So long as they're laying sideways, you're in good shape. And I find the larger the pins that I have, the faster this goes along. So you could use those flat flower pins. Say something like this. They're going to work really, really well. Or anything that's got a fairly large head to it. And I'm just basically pinning right along the inside edge of my salvage. So we've got that on. Okay, I make sure that the head of my pin is to the outside of my material. So once we have that done, we're going to come in and we're going to turn the rail until that edge of that pinned area is going to be right along the edge of that bottom pole here. Now, when we come forward and we pin the second part of the backing onto the frame, because remember we have to stretch this just like you would do if you were doing it on a table, we would want to come in and we're going to attach it to the front of the two rails. So on the front of the frame, we've got two rails. We're going to come in, we're going to pick out this one, the one that's actually, I should rephrase that, the one that is closest to the back rail is the one that we want to put it on. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to fold the backing in half, find the mark that I did on my leader cloth, and you know these leader cloths didn't have those marks. So I just put that on with a Sharpie. And if you're doing work with your quilting, definitely mark your leader cloth. You don't want to have to refigure it out every single time. So what's kind of fun now with the backing pinned on that back, you have a place to stick your pin cushion, which makes it a little bit more convenient. Normally, I hate to say it, guys, but I usually have my pins in my mouth. But I can't talk and pin that way, so. And I know we'll get comments at the bottom saying that that's a very unsafe way to do things. I do understand. Sometimes bad habits die hard. All right, so we are going along. We're getting close to our end. And remember that last pin is going to go on to facing outward. So you'll see on this side, I'm pinning on this side of my leader cloth. On the back side, I was pinning with the pins on the backing of the fabric. Here's the thing, it doesn't make any difference. A lot of things that you see for long arms, you know, they're telling you that you need to overlap your fabric, or you know, you have to be pinning on one side. Really, all we're doing is attaching the fabric to the leader cloth. So just go ahead. I really think the only rule is about every 6 inches. If you get any further apart than that, then when you tighten up on the quilt backing, it kind of bows a little bit in that area. But other than that, just treat it like a seam. And we've got 2 more pins. And once again, my last pin, that head is facing the outside. All right, so now we're going to kind of let the backing drape down. I have a little bit of a rumple going on over here, so let me just go ahead and take care of that. This bar here, I've got locked, and Pam, can you swing around this way? You'll see that there's little latches on the locks. So what I've done is I've flipped that over, so now when I pull against that, it's locked into position. Now I'm going to come in on the front. I'm going to flip that latch piece over, and I'm going to start rolling. And it's important that you flip that little lock over because it tells you which way to roll your fabric. I can't roll it backwards. I can only come forwards. So that way you don't really have to think about it too much. It's just going to come along in. And so at this point, all we're trying to do is keep it even, going along. Here's the one danger. You're going along and you're like, oh, I'm going to smooth this. Okay, only smooth this after you've got a couple of wraps on there. Because remember, you've got a row of pins in. Ask me how I know. I have scraped my palm because I didn't have enough fabric between me and the pins. So literally once you've got that done, you've got a couple of layers, you can just kind of smooth it, and you can just go ahead and bring that up. So this is very much just like if you're clamping it on a table, like I did a video not that long ago, that you have your backing held taut. Now, something that happens on frame machines is you get it rolled up. I had a straight edge on both sides, right? But you see how this side is a little bit more taut than this side? Well, here's the magic. What you do is you unlock both of your locks. You then take and you roll the fabric, maybe a couple of feet, go in that direction. And then you roll the fabric a couple of feet coming this way. So once again, I'm trying to get those pins lined up with that back bar. Then go ahead and throw your locks over. And go ahead and tighten up on the front. I don't know why it works. I'm sure that there's a physics problem in there somewhere. But do you see how now our fabric is completely flat and taut? So I didn't have to unpin. That's assuming that you have that straight edge at the top and the bottom. All right, so we've got our backing stretched. The next thing that we need to do is we need to put on our batting. So I'm using warm and natural batting. And what I'm going to do is tuck the batting in between the two front bars. Remember that warm and natural batting, the side that has the flex. So if you take a look, can we zoom in? All right, the side that has the flex is the top of the batting. If we flip this over, you'll see you can barely see the flex on that side. So warm and natural is super easy to see what is the top side. Now, of course, if you were doing this on a table, you'd want to have this facing at the top. And of course, if you've never paid any attention to it, it's not a crisis. Your quilt's not going to implode because you've got the batting upside down. But what it does do is if you're doing a darker quilt, you're less likely to get little pills if you've got that scrim on the bottom holding that fiber in. All right, so we kind of laid this on. And so what's really cool about warm and natural, it's a cotton batting, so it kind of sticks to your fabric. However, it doesn't stick enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in, I'm going to move my pins here, and I'm going to take my machine, and I'm going to bring it over to the side here. And I'm just going to take it and I'm going to sink the needle in so that it kind of holds itself in position. Pam tells me I need to turn the light off, so hang out for a second so we can turn that off. Oops. Better? All the way off? All the way off. She says you can see better if it's all the way off. All right. So we're happy. Let's go back to where we need to be. All right. So what we would like to do on this quilt is we would like to baste a straight line going across the front of the quilt, or the top of the quilt. So on my screen, you'll see that I have a little inch mark here, and it's at 13 right now. I'm going to minus that down until I come to the lowest number, which on this machine is 4. So that's 4 stitches per inch. That is going to give you about a 1/4 inch seam. Now I would like to take and do a straight line. And so one of the things that you can add to any long arm, if it doesn't already come with it, is a channel lock. It's a flexible piece of plastic with rubber pieces at the end. And what you do is you take it around to the back of your machine and you pick out one of the wheels. I'll pick out the back one because I think it'll be the easiest for Pam to do the camera. And you get that rubber piece so that it's right on the track around the wheel. At that point, now when you move the machine, it will only go side to side. It will not move. So if you see I'm pushing on the machine, it really doesn't want to move front and back. So it's only going to go side to side. So I'm going to come back around. We're going to do one last thing before we start stitching here. We're going to come in. I'm going to put the clamps on just to kind of pull it on the side, and you'll see there's bungee cords and there's like a little stopper there. So you go ahead and push that there, and I'm going to do the same thing over here on the other side. So now we are ready to rock. So when you're basting, we're going to start the machine, and I'm just going to kind of help it along to start with. And you'll notice that it's just really light guiding. There's no death grip on doing channel locking. It's very fingertip guiding. And we're just going to stitch along. So that we have a straight line at the top of our quilt. So I've got the straight line running here. And what it's done is it's stitched my backing to my quilt top. So now I can go to the front of the frame and I can tug on the bottom of that to the backing. Pam goes to me, it's not to the quilt top, it's to the backing, I'm sorry. So we stitched it to the backing. Now I can pull on that batting and get that nice and taut on there. All right, before we change the basting stitch and start actually stitching, we're going to come in and we're going to get our quilt top on. So we're going to find the center of our quilt. And I'm going to line that up with the center. Now, I've got an 8-foot frame, which means when you put it together, there's 4-foot posts. So do you see how there's a little opening there? Okay, where those posts went together. So I always know where the middle of my quilt should go. If you have a 10-foot frame, there's quite possibly like a 2-foot section in the middle, so you don't have that mark. So take a Sharpie and mark it, because you're going to want it every single time you do a quilt. All right, so now the goal is to take the edge of my border and line it up right with that row of basting. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to have to bump Pam over onto this side. Thank you. Now, the channel lock, while it holds the machine in place, it doesn't lock it so tight that you can't move it if you muscle it a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew and just pull my machine about 1/2 inch forward. Make sure that you get your quilt top underneath, and then we're going to come across, and if we need to smooth or move, this is the one to take your time with. So I think we've established that Loretta has a little bit of OCD in her, and so I want that quilt top lined up exactly along that first row of basting. And now I'm coming in, and then I'm going to go ahead and stop. So now we have the quilt top attached to the batting and the backing. So the only thing left for us to do is to attach the quilt top to the front bar with the leader cloth. So we're going to grab our quilt top. And this time it's super easy if you're using a pincushion, because you can just throw it up on the top here. We're going to get our leader cloth. So there's my mark for my leader cloth. I'm going to fold my quilt in half. Line that up with my leader mark. So I've got that in the center. And we're going to pin across there. So get that pin in the center, and then you can decide which way you're going to go first. So we're just pinning it across. And this time I don't have salvage edges because I don't have salvage edges on my border. So I'm just trying to be roughly a 1/2 inch in. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we don't want to go from 3/4 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch kind of deal. All right, come to the end, flip that pin so that the head of the pin is facing to the outside of the quilt. And then we have one more side over here. So I wanted to do this video in real time without cutting out to pin while you weren't watching, because I wanted you to see how fast you can put a quilt on a frame. If you don't have a long arm and have been playing with the thought of, oh, maybe I might want to do a long arm, it's sometimes really intimidating when you first get started loading up the quilt, because there's just like there's so many different people, there's so many different ways that people do this. And I'm not saying that this way is the absolute be-all end-all way, but it's a very logical way. And it's a very simple way to load up your quilt. All right, last thing, we've got our quilt top pinned to our leader cloth. We're going to flip that leader cloth, make sure that we don't, you see how sometimes your leader cloth will get weird twists. So you want to just make sure that that's laying nice and flat before you start to roll it up. And then we're going to make sure that we have our lock on, because remember, if you put the lock on, there's no question about which way you should be doing it, because I can't turn it the opposite way. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to start rolling my quilt top down. So if you get a little bit of a loop here, stop back over there. And this is actually a really nice size quilt to get started if you haven't done a frame before, or if you're just getting back to it. This is the 3-yard quilt that Pam did, I think it was last week or possibly the week before. So if you recognize this, you're like, no. And hey, we're getting it quilted in that short amount of time. It didn't sit in the unfinished pile for 6 months. So do we get credit?
Absolutely.
So we're going to roll this up. Okay, smooth her down and check it out. Now your quilt top is going to line up right along that edge. Now, things to know if you've not worked on a frame before. We tend to, on our domestic sewing machine, we stretch that backing as tight as we possibly can. And you know, so we're really trying to stretch it tight. On a frame, there should be an amount of bounce to it. So don't be uncomfortable with the fact that your quilt may vibrate a little bit. It doesn't have gigantic amounts of bounce, but you can kind of pat the quilt, and it'll, it doesn't want to be like the head of a drum where you've stretched it so taut that you could play music off of it. You know, it wants to have a little bit of flexibility to it. Now, the design that we did in the classroom sample, that organic wave, is super, super simple to do. So what we're going to do is we need to change our stitch length from the basting, because we don't want to baste this. And so we're going to come in and we're going to increase our stitch. And I'm going to go to about 12 stitches per inch. I'm then going to take it and I'm going to run around the back of my frame and get rid of that channel lock. Now, if you wanted to do straight lines, so if you had a quilt like this one, I'm going to throw this up so. Okay, see how we've got, if you wanted to do straight lines, you could literally take your channel lock and you could make marks along the edge of your batting. So like if I wanted to do it every 2 inches, I could take and make a mark on my batting on both sides, and I could pull the channel lock forward and then channel lock across and then come back and forth as we work. For the lines for doing the waves, the organic waves, we don't need the channel lock. So I take the channel lock off. I always put my channel lock up over on my handlebar. That way I know where it is the next time I need it. And so literally I'm just going to come forward. Okay, I'm going to tuck underneath, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just do a gradual thing. What I want you to pay attention to when you're seeing this in the video is you do not see me with this kind of death grip on the frame, on the handlebars. It's really going to be like I'm guiding one hand going this way, and then I'm going one hand coming back that way. All right, so I'm going to be quiet because you can't really hear me when I do this anyway. All right, so we've come to the other side. We've got a little bit of a wave. I've chosen a gray thread because this has got so much activity in it already. We really don't need, we just want the texture. We don't need more activity on this quilt. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to sew forward on the batting, and then I'm going to come backwards. So we'll tuck underneath, and then we'll come along. Come to the other end. I can stop the machine. I'm then going to sew forward a couple of inches, and then I'm going to go across again. Now get to about here, I need to start checking on some things. Do you see how I have the space between the bar and the back of the machine? So I'm probably going to be able to get at least one more row, possibly two, before I need to swap anything out. So we'll come forward again, we'll do another row. I'm going to pause. I can probably sneak another one so long as I don't go too wild. All right. Now, I only have I can fit my hand back there and I can wiggle it just a little bit. Not enough to do a wave, because what's going to happen is if I hit the back of the machine and I hit the back of the bar, then it's going to go straight, right? And I want these to be nice and organic. So now we need to stop and we need to wrap up. Totally not a big deal. So what we want to do is we want to raise up our needle. We're going to take our thread in the front and give a little bit of slack so that we can separate the machine. And I literally just break it with my hands. You can use a pair of scissors. We're going to take the clamps off of both ends. And we're going to take the locks off on all of the bars. When you do that, this naturally kind of goes forward because it's no longer being held taut. So now you can come to the back bar and you can wrap it up. So what you're looking to do is you're looking to have the last row that you just did be about 2 or 3 inches in front of the bar. So what you can see is right here, this is as far back as I can go because the back of here will hit the bar. So I want to position it so that I can get a row where I would like it to be. But once again, these organic rows, if you have a little bit more space between one or the other of the rows, it's not going to make any difference. It actually looks better because it gives you more texture. Once you have that done, you're going to go ahead and you're going to lock her up on both the back and the inner one, the ones that we attach the backing to. So we're going to pull that taut first. Then I like to go and get my batting, and I will grab a hold of my batting on all sides, and I'll come down here and give it a little bit of a tug. Make sure I'm happy with how things are laying out. Then I'm going to come in, and that front bar, which is going to control our quilt top, we're going to go ahead and tighten it up. So I actually, when I move it, I do it in exactly the same sequence I did when I pinned it on. I take care of the backing first, then I take care of the batting, and then I do the quilt top on there. So it's, you're not changing the order. Last thing to do is to pop those little clamps on the side so that we have a little bit of sideways tautness. And then we can go ahead and we can start. And what's nice is you can come out here on the batting, pull your bobbin thread up. So I just did a stitch. Just hold on to your top thread just like you do on a sewing machine. Pull that bobbin thread up and do a little tack stitch to kind of anchor it in, and then you're ready to go. So we'll continue down and finish this quilt. Literally, it's probably going to take me 15 minutes to finish the rest of this quilt. We'll cut it off of the frame, trim up the edges, and put a separate binding on it. So I hope you enjoyed this kind of glimpse into a long arm world. I wanted you to realize that it's not complicated. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's a very easy thing to do. And if you've not had a long arm and you're considering one, you know, a Moxie would be a great way to enter in where you would not have to invest so much that you feel like you have to go into business. You know, this can just be your personal quilting machine. So next week, we're going to switch up again, and I'm going to do a really simple project. Lazy Girl Patterns has got a pattern for perfect pouches. So I'm going to do just little pouches, things that you can put together in, you know, 15, 20 minutes with zippers. So we'll see you next time. Hi! So if you enjoyed this video and are interested in a basic long arm, call the store for current pricing.